Welcome back to another explainer. Let's just jump right in, shall we? Today, we are going on a bit of a journey. We're tracking the path of a simple thought, a desire for something, all the way from your personal wallet to the grand scale of macroeconomics. We're breaking down the absolute mechanics of consumer demand. To kick things off, ask yourself this. Why doesn't your burning desire for, say, a personal helicopter impact the economy? Well, the answer lies in the difference between wishing and doing. As our source material beautifully outlines, just wanting a helicopter is merely an ex ante demand. It literally affects nobody, because, frankly, I don't have the cash for a helicopter. No one in the market reacts to my window shopping wish. But my desire to purchase a sensible Honda, assuming I actually have the money for it, is an ex post demand. Once I express that desire and it's backed by my wallet, it sets the whole process of production into motion. Okay, here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover wanting versus demanding. 2. The drivers of demand. 3. The law of demand. 4. Visualizing the demand curve. 5. Movements versus shifts. And finally, 6. Shaping government policy. Let's start with section 1, wanting versus demanding. So there is a massive, absolute difference in economics between a want and a demand. A want is simply a wish to possess a commodity. Think of it like window shopping. You can want 1,000 different things, but without the money to actually buy them, the market doesn't care. It remains an ex ante wish. Demand, on the other hand, is that wish firmly backed by actual sufficient purchasing power. When you demand something, you have the money and you are ready to spend it. That's an ex post reality, and that is what actually sets the wheels of economic production in motion. And what's really interesting is how economists measure this. Demand isn't just a single event, it's measured as a flow over time. And it really only makes economic sense when it's tied to a specific time frame and a specific price. For example, simply saying your demand for oranges is 10 is kind of meaningless. But saying you demand 10 oranges per week at a price of 12 rupees a dozen, now that is a full, meaningful economic statement. It's a desired purchase over time at a specific price point. Moving right along to section 2, the drivers of demand. So the crucial point here is that an individual consumer's demand doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It is heavily driven by 4 main factors. First, the price of the commodity itself. Second, the prices of other related commodities, think substitutes like tea versus coffee. Third, the income of the consumer. And fourth, the taste or preference of the consumer. To study these clearly, economists usually assume ceteris paribus, which is just a fancy Latin phrase meaning other things remaining equal. Basically, we change one factor, like price, and freeze all the others to see exactly what happens. And this brilliantly illustrates how we scale up from your personal wallet to the entire global market. To figure out market demand, you simply take the demand of all possible individual consumers and add them together. The factors are exactly the same, but you add 2 massive macro-level drivers, the size of the population and the income distribution within that population. Because naturally, a larger population, or a population where wealth is distributed differently, is going to dramatically alter the total market demand. Which brings us to section 3, the law of demand. This is the big one, the law of demand. Stated simply, other things remaining equal, there is an inverse relationship between the price of a commodity and its quantity demanded. Meaning, when prices fall, demand rises. When prices rise, demand falls. It makes total logical sense to us as shoppers, right? But why exactly does this happen? Well, the mechanics of the law of demand actually come down to the sum of 2 really powerful psychological and economic effects. First up is the substitution effect. If a product's price goes up, we naturally look for a cheaper substitute to replace it. Second is the income effect. If the price goes up, our existing income simply can't buy as much as it used to, which effectively lowers our purchasing power. When you add the substitution effect and the income effect together, you get the total price effect. And that is the absolute engine behind why the law of demand works. Let's jump to section 4, visualizing the demand curve. Let's put some real numbers to this with a demand schedule for a consumer buying apples. This perfectly charts the inverse relationship we just talked about. Consider this scenario. When the price of an apple is 100 rupees, the consumer demands 15 units a week. But watch what happens as the price steps up. At 200 rupees, demand drops to 12. At 300, it falls to 8. And when the price hits 400 rupees, no way. The quantity demanded plummets all the way down to just 3 apples a week. Now, if we map that exact data from the schedule onto a graph, with quantity on the bottom axis and price on the vertical axis, we get the classic demand curve. you'll see a perfect visual model of our Apple data sloping downwards from left to right. That downward slope is the literal visual proof of the law of demand. As you move higher up the price axis, you're forced to move further left along the quantity axis, which simply means less is bought.
All right, Section 5, Movements versus Shifts.
It is absolutely crucial to understand the difference between sliding along an existing curve versus the entire curve moving. If only the price tag of a commodity changes, you simply slide up or down along the existing demand curve. Economists call this an extension or contraction of demand. But if a completely different factor changes, say suddenly your income doubles, or a massive new health trend makes apples incredibly popular, the entire curve actually shifts completely to the left or the right. We call that an absolute increase or decrease in demand, totally independent of the price.
Finally, we have Section 6, Shaping Government Policy.
The law of demand isn't just for textbooks, it's a vital, everyday tool for policymakers. For instance, if there's a massive surplus of a product, meaning the quantity produced is way higher than the demand at the current price, the government uses this law to realize they need to step in and lower the price to clear the market. Furthermore, they use this exact behavioral model to figure out where to apply taxes or offer subsidies. They know exactly how tweaking the price through a new tax will mathematically contract consumer demand for that specific commodity. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a bit of a challenge. Look at the news tomorrow. When you see a story about a new tax or a new subsidy on a product, ask yourself, how is the government using the law of demand to artificially move your purchasing power up or down that curve? Understanding these invisible levers gives you a completely new perspective on your own wallet and the entire global economy. Thanks so much for joining me, and keep on learning.